Welcome to Canada's home for college football. Right here, it is Krown, Gridiron Nation on TSN. And welcome to the Hubcast studios in Vancouver, everyone. I'm Jim Mullen, he's Gord Randall, and Mike Hogan will join us in a second. But as always, off the top of the show, it's time to go south of the line to see how our guys did in our 2-minute offense. Oklahoma State went from ranked to rank in Lubbock as they took on the Red Raiders. The good news for the Pokes was that Sherwood Park native and Heisman candidate Chuba Hubbard had another great day, 163 yards, a hat trick of TDs. Bad news, Cowboys lost 45-35, and they are out of the top 25. Those Oklahoma Sooners continue to roll this week. They put up 45 against the Kansas Jayhawks. A quiet day for Ottawa's Neville Gallimore. He had 3 tackles, but one of them was a TFL. Penn State Purdue, the Nittany Lions led by the Canadian 3, hammered the Boilermakers by 28. Lions stay perfect, but this week they take on ranked Iowa. We'll preview that game later in the show. Southeastern Louisiana on the wrong end of the box score against McNeese State, losing by 4. Dartmouth, Nova Scotia native Isaac Berglund was flying around, finishing with 7 tackles, and he also netted a quarterback sack. No big surprises with Notre Dame and Bowling Green. The Fighting Irish put up a 50-burger. Abbotsford's Chase Claypool with a career-high 2 tutties in this one. Made only 3 catches, but continues to produce week after week, finding the promised land. The game of the week for CanCon, Ohio versus Buffalo. 7 Canucks dressed for this one. Windsor native QB turned wide receiver Dominic Johnson found the end zone with this 4-yard TD catch. On the other side of the ball, a good game for Oakville's Nathan Rourke. Only 155 passing yards, but added 63 on the ground, ran one in for a score. This one needed OT. Buffalo started with the ball, they missed the PAT. Ohio gets the ball, they score, and they convert the PAT. Bobcats open MAC action with a 1-point win. TSN football analyst Dave Naylor was down in Buffalo, New York to see Ohio and Buffalo, and we caught up with him earlier. Dave, welcome to Gridiron Nation. Now that you've seen Nathan Rourke up close, what do you make of his play? What stood out for you?
Well, I think the word that jumps to mind is one I've heard used to describe him before, and that is that he's a gamer. I mean, this was not an easy game against a very tough University of Buffalo defense. I mean, they were inside the 5-yard line on one series of downs, weren't able to score. Another play, he threw an interception in the red zone, and yet, you never saw his body language change. You never saw his command of the huddle change, and really, it was a game I think they recognized early on was going to be a tough one, and in the end, he picked his spots to run with the football, picked his spots to throw, and just kind of had that energy all game long that eked out a very tough overtime win against the Bulls in their first conference game of the season.
I had the opportunity to see Nathan Rourke in Buffalo 2 years ago on that very same field. He was equally a passing threat and a running threat. What do you see of his pro potential as a pure passer?
Well, it was a tough day to see that. I mean, he was 12 of 19 for 155 yards today. In fact, in the first half, he was just 4 of 6 for 32, and they weren't getting a lot. He wasn't getting a lot of time to pass. In fact, when I spoke to him after the game, he said they knew on film that the Buffalo Bulls were going to be able to generate pressure without blitzing, so they were going to have to rely on a lot of counters, a lot of misdirection, a lot of running the football. But, we did see him try to go deep with the ball a few times. One of them was almost intercepted that turned into a big gain, but you saw his accuracy really on crossing patterns, those kind of things. But in terms of airing it out with his arm, we didn't really get to see the opportunity of him doing that today.
Rourke carries so much pro potential coming into this year. Where do you see him ending up at the end of this year in terms of his professional outcome?
Well, I think everyone knows that there are scouts from both the NFL and the CFL watching him. And one of the things I talked to him about after the game is how do you balance, what the scouts want to see with what your team needs. And he says, that's one of those things. He's a team-first guy. He's a captain. He tries not to think about those other things. But I think the challenge for him coming out of the Mid-American Conference and being a guy who runs a lot is can he prove that he can throw from the pocket accurately enough with the football to be able to be considered for the next level. I mean, I think he can play his way into NFL consideration, but again, coming from this conference and being a guy who runs a lot, I think that there's going to be a challenge for him in there. Now, when it comes to the Canadian Football League, absolutely, given his status as a Canadian, which now helps at the quarterback position, his ability to be the dual threat guy, running the football, throwing on the run, and what he's done really as a winner here at the University of Ohio, he absolutely is going to get consideration. And I think a lot of fans should be excited whether he ends up with an opportunity south of the border or whether he comes directly to the Canadian Football League. I think there's no question he's going to have a pro career.
That's Dave Naylor in Buffalo, New York. So, will we see Nathan Rourke in our stateside five? In at number 5, Regina-born quarterback Mike Beaudry of UConn. A losing day for the Huskies, but a pretty good day through the air with 209 yards passing. He went 18 of 29 with a TD. Number 4, Oakville, Ontario's Nathan Rourke at quarterback, 155 through the air, 63 on the ground, and a TD for a much-needed opening win in MAC action. Defensive back Javon Holland, born in Vancouver, found his way through California and found his way to the Oregon Ducks, and this interception. He also added 3 tackles. In at number 2, Abbotsford's Chase Claypool, 3 receptions for 63 yards, a pair of touchdowns. He did his damage early against Bowling Green, got to rest for most of that second half. Numero uno, once again, it is Chuba Hubbard from OK State. He is the Cowboys' workhorse. 34 carries, 163 yards, and 3 TDs. He leads the nation in rushing. When it comes to the stateside 5, when it comes to the leaders for the Cornish Trophy, it usually comes down to 3 guys, Gord. We've got Nathan Rourke, who we talked about earlier. Then you've got Chuba Hubbard, and you've got Chase Claypool. Those 2 basically in the lead for this award. But you got to give Hubbard the edge for hype. You got to give Hubbard the edge for numbers. So how does Chase Claypool find a way throughout this season to maybe take the lead when it comes to public perception?
Well, I think it's going to be tough for Chase Claypool to do so. Part of the reason is that he often gets mothballed pretty early if there's a lopsided score for the Fighting Irish. So this week, for example, he was cooling his heels by halftime. A nice, easy 2 touchdown catches for about 60 yards in the first half, and then they shut him down because they were walking all over Bowling Green. When the schedule starts to get a little bit more difficult for Notre Dame, then maybe Chase Claypool has his chance to shine and be a little bit more of a presence on the national stage. As for how he can catch up to Hubbard, Hubbard's numbers are so overwhelming right now, it's going to be tough, but Hubbard's running into the tough part of his schedule as well, and we saw again this weekend, despite a lot of volume and despite finding the end zone 3 times, he was not particularly efficient and only racking up about 156 yards on the ground. So if those performances continue from Hubbard and Claypool continues to step up in the biggest stages, then I think that Claypool can certainly be in the conversation.
Guys, always great to talk about the big 3 as always, and for great reasons, obviously. But, I want to go back to what Gordy was talking about last week when it came to the Oregon Ducks. And one of the reasons that they've really turned it up on defense is the play of a guy born and raised for the early part of his life in Vancouver, played his high school ball in California, and that's Javon Holland, who's a sophomore safety for the Ducks. Last weekend, they were trailing Cal 7-0 late in the first half when Cal was moving into scoring range once again. They tried to go deep late in the first half, but Javon Holland was there. His 3rd interception of the season. I wanted to get a little love in on the defensive side of the football because we've been talking for obvious reasons again about some of the great offensive contributors that we've seen south of the border.
When we come back, we will roll through U Sports. Stick around.
In British Columbia's Similkameen Valley, our partner Sunny Dhaliwal and his family grow and pack some of the finest fruit you will ever taste. Thank you, Sunny, for making Krown produce fresh at its best.
Welcome back to the Hubcast studios in Vancouver, everyone. Now's the time to take a trip on the Trans-Canada Highway of football in our 3-minute warning. First place showdown in the West, Alberta and Calgary. Bears were actually up by 3 at the half. Second half, though, all Dinos. Calgary on a 20-0 scoring rampage, led by backup quarterback Josiah Joseph, who had 3 touchdown passes and 334 through the air. Manitoba, Saskatchewan. Oh, payback is hell. Saskatchewan avenges their season-opening loss at Manitoba with a 28-point stomping of the Herd. Adam Mackert with 219 on the ground leads the nation in rushing. You have to start talking about this guy for the heck. UBC off the schneid, surviving a trip to Regina with their first win of the season. Quarterback Gabe Oliveris, the GW Graham grad, with 353 through the air. One TD, added another one with his feet for that big W. Laval and Concordia. What can you say about a 74-0 game? Let's pull two stats out of this one, shall we? 96 yards on 43 plays for Concordia. What a performance by the Laval defense. 592 yards total offense for the Rouge et Or. Panda game, the big number here, the attendance, over 24,600 at TD Place. Hey, we'll take record-breaking attendance for 800, Alex. Carleton led 10-1. Turnovers got to him no later. Ottawa went on a 31-0 run led by the defense. GG's now on a 2-game win run at the Panda. Laurier, Windsor, Golden Hawks blow them out 52-10. Yes, Laurier is peaking at the right time. Quarterback Connor Carasello, 374, 4 TDs, plus a solid defensive effort. Laurier back in the middle of the playoff hunt. A wild and wacky day between Western and Waterloo. How many W's can I put together? Well, one team got a W out of that game. Can you reconstruct what happened in the fourth quarter of that game, Mike?
Wow, where to start? How about 4 lead changes in the final 15 minutes for one thing? And, you know, Western was ahead, then they drive the field, the Warriors do, and Trey Ford scores on a 1-yard quarterback sneak after a long run where he hurdled a player. And all of a sudden, Waterloo's up with a couple of minutes left. Western gets the ball, drives the field. Mark Leggio kicks a field goal with 22 seconds or 24 seconds left to tie the game. Looks like we're going to the shootout. They get the ball back, the Waterloo Warriors do, and instead of taking a knee like I think everybody thought they would do, they countered on their offense to make a big play. Mistake. They handed off to Dion Pellerin, third best back in the country this year in terms of yardage, almost 150 yards on the ground. The problem with this one, the ball ended up on the ground. Western recovered it, and Mark Leggio kicks a game-winning field goal to make it 45-42 on the game's final play. We saw what these two teams can do. This was a wildly entertaining game. I'm just hoping we get a rematch in the postseason, whether it's for the Yates Cup or even in a semifinal.
When we come back, we will take a look at 3 games in the upcoming weekend. You are watching Krown, Gridiron Nation on TSN.
From the Similkameen Valley in British Columbia to the Western Cape of South Africa, our global network of grower partners produce the finest fruits and vegetables for Canadians. Those partners make Krown produce fresh at its best.
There it is, your top 5 high school teams in the nation. If you want to see the total list compiled by Canada Football Chat, go over to their website. It's CanadaFootballChat.com. Welcome back, everyone. Time to look ahead to 3 games to watch coming up this weekend. Number 6 ranked Oklahoma taking on number 11 Texas. It's a big one in the Red River Showdown. Over the last 7 years, the series pretty even. Oklahoma leading 4-3, winning that game between these two last year. Well, Gord, this is one of these situations where the fan at home can make a decision to play scout and look at big number 90 in red in the middle of your screen to see what he does. We try to tell his story in the stateside 5, but sometimes it doesn't necessarily translate to stats when it comes to Neville Gallimore.
No, it absolutely does not. Neville Gallimore, arguably the top pro prospect of the Canadians out there in the NCAA right now, a guy I'm consistently seeing ranked in about the top 100 guys for this upcoming NFL draft, and a guy that could go, depending on how much a certain team likes the fit, could go as early as the 2nd round or as late as, say, the 4th or 5th. So he's kind of in that day 2 range for the NFL draft this upcoming year, and he is a physical specimen. We've talked about this in years past. He eats up a lot of attention on the field. He also eats up a lot of attention off the field, taking some of that heat off of some of his younger teammates. But you can see the flashes from him. It's not a position where you're going to rack up a ton of stats necessarily as a nose tackle. He's stout. He's powerful. We've seen his freakish testing numbers. He's certainly a guy that will be playing on Sundays, probably never on Saturdays, so don't hold your breath there, CFL fans.
Let's go down east. St. Mary's Acadia 5-0 the X-Men are, and they want to run the table in the AUS, led by running back Dale Wright, who leads that conference by 150 yards, 542 on the year so far through 5 games. Well, Mike, it's time to give a team from down east who is undefeated a little bit of love, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I know last week I went off on the computer system that's used in the top 10 balloting from U Sports. This is not a hate-filled diatribe against the AUS specifically, just the fact that they're at low ebb right now in terms of development. And I think everybody wants to see them return to the days of, you know, Sonny Wolf's Acadia teams or the great SMU teams under Coach Nill. But right now they're at low ebb. But within the conference, Acadia's been dynamite. 5-0, they're winning their games by, I think the average is 41-22. And they've got a quarterback in Hunter Gennard who's actually putting up some really good numbers right now. He's got a couple of dozen more passing yards than Adam Sinagra has right now and has thrown as many touchdown passes. So here's some love for the game and for what Acadia is doing in conference. And I think like every U Sports football fan across the country, we want to see that conference get back to the level where the conference, or I guess the national semifinals, are at least competitive, because it hasn't been that way for quite a few years.
Number 10, Penn State at number 17, Iowa. The Nittany Lions at 5-0, but people are questioning that record with an uneven schedule. Time to put it to the test in Iowa City. So Penn State with the Canadian 3, Joseph Luketa and Sutherland. You don't see them out there every snap, though, and these guys could start and stay out on the field just about everywhere in the NCAA, and certainly if you're on the Canadian side of the line, you see quality players out there every snap, but they get to keep these guys fresh by rotating them in and out of the game.
Yeah, they do, and this is one of the elite defenses in the country right now. I talked last week about how Penn State's long been known as linebacker U. Jesse Luketa looks like a guy who's got the potential to be another one in that legacy as well. And you're right, he's a guy that's kind of floating on and off the field. He's also able to contribute on special teams as well. He's got a senior who plays a little bit more in front of him as well. Jonathan Sutherland, same type of guy. He's a guy who's very involved, active on special teams. Both very strong players on one of the best defenses in the country. And Penn State all of a sudden, or maybe not all of a sudden, looks like they're squarely in that conversation for the Big Ten title. And keep in mind, winning a Big Ten title probably means a college football playoff berth as well. So they're a team to really focus your attention on Canada, because with those 3 guys on that defense being Canadians and being involved for that team, on top of the team being really good, it's always worthwhile watching them.
When we come back, we will answer the question, who are our weekend warriors? Hang around. There it is, our Power 7 for another week. When you're the Laval Rouge et Or and you lay waste to an opponent like that, you move up to number 1, especially when Western faltered a little bit in their win. They were lucky to escape. Calgary moves up to number 5. Saskatchewan's into the 7 at 6. Weekend warriors to you, Mr. Hogan.
Well, you say it's weekend warriors, so let's go plural on this one. I want to give it to the entire Ottawa GG's defense for their outstanding effort, particularly in the second half against the Carleton Ravens in the Panda game in front of 24,000 people. They forced 6 turnovers. They scored 16 points. They held Carleton in the second half to no points and just 4 first downs. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind. I want to give multiple awards to everybody on that defense with the Ottawa GG's.
Guys, my weekend warrior is actually going to be a coach this week, and that's Sheriff Nicola over at Bishops. When he took over this program, it was one of the most moribund football programs across the entire country. And going into this season, they had not won a football game since September 15th, 2017, a span of 13 straight losses for the Gators. Well, after this past Friday's win over St. FX, all of a sudden they're 3-3, so they've not only broken the streak, but they actually have put themselves squarely in contention in the AUS and are in good position to lock down a playoff spot this upcoming weekend. And that is a great turnaround for a program in Little Lennoxville, Quebec that had fallen on some very hard times. And for pushing through all those challenges, Sheriff Nicola, you are my weekend warrior.
I love it when backup quarterbacks step up in a big way. So my weekend warrior is Josiah Joseph, the former Okanagan Sun quarterback that's been in Calgary for a couple of years now behind Adam Sinagra. When he was called upon with Adam Sinagra going through concussion protocol, he stepped up big in a clash for first place between them and their provincial rivals. Josiah Joseph, you are my weekend warrior. Triple W2K this week, it goes first to Mr. Randall.
What I want to know this week, I talked about, do we need to pay more attention to the Oregon Ducks last week? Well, now I'm going to take it a step further and ask, is it a fait accompli that the Oregon Ducks are going to go to the Pac-12 title game with a stunning loss at Stanford by the Washington Huskies last weekend? The only team in the Pac-12 North with fewer than 2 conference losses aside from the Ducks is the Oregon State Beavers, who most people would pick to finish at the bottom of that conference or that division when the season began. So for the Ducks, they now have essentially a 2-game cushion in the Pac-12 North, and what was looking like a massive showdown in a couple weeks' time up here in Seattle against Washington with the 2-game cushion all of a sudden means that they don't even have to win that game, and they still are in the driver's seat in the Pac-12 North. So is this just merely a matter of taking care of business from here on out for the Ducks to get to the Pac-12 championship game? That's what I want to know.
Guys, what I want to know is, I guess we all know that the alpha dog in the OUA is Western, but who's the beta dog? And I think there are really 4 really good chances to pick a team and say that's number 2 in the conference, but you can make an argument for right now, I think 4. Maybe the weakest right now is Laurier because they started the season so strongly, weakly, but of late their defense has been swarming and they can run the football. This is a team that seems to be built for October and November. Waterloo can score with anybody in the country, but can their defense stop anybody? Then you've got Guelph, again, kind of like Laurier, where they've got this unbelievable defense, they've got great special teams, but can they score enough points to get into a shootout should that arise? And then you've got McMaster, who did a great job of the weekend holding down a pretty potent Toronto offense, but there's something there that I don't know whether I love them or don't quite love them yet, but I know that the marriage between Steph Potasic and Andreas Dueck has been fantastic because he's really establishing himself as a quarterback that I think everybody thought he'd be when he came into the league. So what I want to know is who's the second best team in Ontario right now?
My Triple W2K concerns the very first runner-up in the Cornish Award, and that's Dejan Brissett. Are we finally going to get to see a breakout game for the transfer from Richmond that went to Virginia that piled up so many yards in 2017? He's appeared on the field a couple of times. He came off a nagging hamstring injury in training camp. With that extra week off, is he finally healthy? Is he finally 100%? And will Dejan Brissett finally produce? That's what I want to know. Just a reminder, the Gridiron Nation podcast is available on Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes. But for now, this is Jim Mullen saying, let's get out to the game.